5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You are listening to CMajor Before the Show. Thank you so much for being here on this Saturday evening. It's after 5 o'clock Eastern Time, believe it. And thank you so much for joining us. It's been a lovely weekend so far. The weather has been a little bit chilly, but I'm not complaining. So if you're out and about in the greater New York City area, we just encourage you to keep warm, and make sure you wear layers. And that's the best way to do it here. If you're in this area, wear layers so that if you need to adjust, you can. But all day today, we are expecting temperatures in the 30s. And I think it might have gotten up to maybe around 40 something degrees, but not too high today. We're not complaining at all. It's been a very nice fall so far as we head into the holidays and head into the winter. So no complaints at all, and quite sunny this week. Just very little rain. So welcome to CMajor Before the Show. I'm your host, CMajor Porter. Thank you so much again for being here. We are going to be talking today about chord progressions, more on that topic. And I just have a question. Have you ever thought about the chords that you choose to either play or listen to? And do you know why you choose those particular sounds? Also, in the promo for today's show, I think I mentioned that we're going to also play some interesting sounds here on the podcast, so you may hear some sounds like the ones you're hearing now. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with those sounds, but if you hear me do something like that, just know I'm just basically experimenting. I'm really fascinated with this little synthesizer, and I encourage you to do the same thing. Just start really finding some creative things to do with your music making. Everything doesn't have to be tonal or linear or diatonic or anything like that. Make the best music that you make. That's what we say here on the podcast. I'm going to gather some notes. I really didn't make a whole lot of notes for today's podcast episode, but I'm going to gather some notes, and give me just a few seconds and I'll be right back. You're listening to CMajor Before the Show. Okay, and I am back. I just wanted to put my hands on some of the notes that we will use for today's podcast. And so you'll hear the music go in and out today, and it's because I am wrestling with these papers. I wasn't quite sure which progression I was going to use today. I just know that everything we do here on the podcast really is inspired by you. So if you are my student and you're listening to the podcast, just know you are the inspiration for this podcast. Without you, I would not have started the podcast. So I wanted CMajor Before the Show to be the type of podcast that you would listen to prior to joining us over at the CMajor radio show, which we will be doing a little bit later on. And the CMajor radio show, we went back and forth for a while because we didn't know how serious we wanted the tone to be over there. So it has gone through some ups and downs, but I'm starting to think we should just really level it out and make sure that we're bringing to you what you want. So CMajor Before the Show is basically a warm-up podcast to the CMajor radio show. Okay, so the progressions. Let's think about this. We are starting to step into some new territory. I know I have students that also ask me, can you please let me do something a little bit more advanced? Sure. I just wanted to make sure that you know the basics first. And then we'll jump into that. But then, of course, you have students that don't want to wait. And so they push you a little to get them to where they really want to go, like they have their own timeline. Okay, so how comfortable are you with scales? Number one, first of all. So if I played a scale, would you recognize it? Would you recognize it as minor or major or something else? If I played a diminished chord, would you recognize that? Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just play some examples that I've come across. And so I don't know how much analysis I'm going to do, to be honest. I feel like sometimes you overanalyze things and you should just really play them and then just see if your listeners can get anything out of it, This is such a different approach for me because, again, I did not learn to play by chords and by ear. I started playing by ear when I was very young, and then I started to take piano lessons so I could learn to read music, but to really just focus on chords, as some musicians who play by ear do, and chord progressions. That was not the way I learned. I did not learn Chopin by focusing on the chord progressions first. And even the sound was just reading the notes that were put in front of me and being super comfortable with that. But now what I try to do with my students is just give them a balance. So they're thinking about time signature. They're thinking about their note symbols. They're thinking about their fingering. They're thinking about chord tones. They're thinking about if things are moving in steps or half steps. They're thinking about... And, I do have some shout-outs, but we're going to save those later. I think in last week's podcast episode, we put the shout-outs up front, a little bit closer to the front, but we're going to put the music up front right now. So you'll just hear me call out some things. I'm just kind of in that mood today where I'm just going to play some things on piano and then just call them out as I go and then see if you can recognize those things. See if those things are interesting to you, first of all, because if they are, what we will do for 2020 is try to include those in our list of topics for each episode. Try to plan ahead so we know a little bit more about what we're going to say as we go and include more diverse topics. So not everything will just focus on chords. This was a big year for chords. It really was. But I think now we're going to focus back a little bit more on other topics as we had started to do. But I just felt like we had lost our way a little bit and that we needed to just focus on chords and then after that just branch off. But again, this was inspired by you. So if my students had not been asking about chords, I probably would not have focused on chords so much. But I have students that really, really, really love the chords. So our shout out is actually going to include a student that is really, really excited about chords. And then, of course, when you have students who are growing into being able to play chords, then you have to wait for that growth first before focusing on chords. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to let the music play, and then I'm going to go to the piano, and then I'm just going to play some examples, talk a little bit about what it is that I'm playing, and then we'll come back down, do some shout-outs, and then we'll end today's podcast episode. But not before I tell you what we're going to do over at the CMajor radio show. Okay, normally what we do over there, by the way, if it's your first time listening, welcome to the podcast. Normally what we do over there is try to write down music clearly. And what I've been doing is just calling everything out as text so that you can get it. Now, for some reason, we lose our connection. Just know that I will close out this recording and then just open up a new live recording so we can carry on with today's topic. Okay, so you're going to hear some movement. And then you're going to hear me turn on the piano. Okay, already making sounds. And by the way, if you have a chance to look at, should have brought my folder, it's okay. By the way, if you have a chance to look at the photo, because every episode we have an opportunity to present a photo. It's a photo that really speaks to what I'm trying to do with my own health, and that is eat a lot of salads. You know, salads are a choice. We'll come back to that thought. But anyway, I'm going to play something and just see if you recognize it. I'm trying to see where I should place my microphone. Let me place it over here. See if that'll work. And if not, I'll place it somewhere else. Okay. Okay, so let me play that again because I think I might have played that before in the past. And so I'm not sure if we talked about the idea of learning scales first and then chords later. So excuse me, I'm just moving the microphone around a little bit. I just don't want the microphone to pick up too much noise. Let's see if I'll place it over here. I think I have omnidirectional microphone. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so this is just a way of practicing descending dominant 7 scales. Okay, and so let me just play one more here. Okay, so then that was just some discussion of where the scale should originate, especially if you're talking about chord tones. And so we'll say a little bit more about that in the coming year. This is basically a tease, I think, for 2020. Okay, now, I'm just taking this one page at a time, and we'll see how far we go. And then I'll probably just stop, and then we'll go back to our other area. All right. So, let's see. Okay, and that's a big stretch, too. I'm playing a 10th in my left hand and then the right hand. Okay, by the way, if anybody wants to know the resources that we use here on the podcast, just let me know. I will definitely share that information with you. And 9 times out of 10, I've usually said it in an earlier podcast, but if it's your first time listening and you're trying to figure out what we're doing. So what this passage is labeled as, I don't know if you could hear it. It's supposed to be a D minor 7, followed by a G7, followed by a C major chord. It's a triad. Okay, so if I were teaching this, I would teach my students to play it as a 4-note 7 chord, okay, and then go to another 4-note 7 chord in root position, and then go to a triad, and then we would talk about inversions. And so not everybody teaches the same way. I can see that. And so this it's coupled with, so you're supposed to hear the changes so that you hear how the scales that we just practiced fall with the chord changes. So D minor 7, moving to a G7, moving to just a C chord. So I love this example because it really does show you how the hands can work together to create a different sound. So everything doesn't sound cluttered, it doesn't sound quote unquote wrong, if you want to use that word. And so to choose to play your chords and practice your chords in this way, I think is really, really powerful. So now I'm going to play a couple more scale runs that I'm also seeing in this example that I picked up over the summer. That it's meant to be practiced is so that you do it slowly, so that you really, really hear what's going on with all of these notes, the sequence of it all, and then the chords. So if I wanted to do this the way that I teach, I would play this first set of runs with a C major chord in the left hand. To a C minor triad in the left hand and play. Okay, and there's a reason behind that. There's definitely a method to the madness. We haven't talked about Roman numerals so much in here on the podcast, but maybe we will for 2020. I do know that I have a couple of students now who are very interested in talking in terms of analysis and Roman numerals. Very exciting, by the way. But they're young. We're talking about students who are just starting to get their feet wet with music making and really understand the music that they're making and how to talk about it in a number of ways. Okay. So now we're going to play something involving triplets. Now, I don't think we've done that much here on the podcast. So see what you think about this. Now, I just recently spoke with a student about motifs. She's learning a very traditional song that actually appears in one of her method books. I was very surprised to see this song that is still being printed today, but it's also by a very famous composer. And so the word motif came up because the song does contain some melodic motifs that are very recognizable. And so now you're going to hear a set of motifs. Okay. So, again, we can talk in terms of the degrees of a scale and how the motifs are built on those, and then how you would choose the chords that you play underneath that just to practice those motifs. And then hopefully when we change locations, I will talk about what I actually mean when I say motif, and we're going to use if I can put my hands on my favorite dictionary, and we can talk further about that word motif, because it did come up this week with one of my students. Okay, now we're going to try these scale runs with chord changes. So the chord changes, again, I'm going to play them the way that I teach them in root position. So I'm playing a D minor 7 chord. And then if you're with me over at the C Major radio show, I will spell out these chords to tell you what I was doing. Okay, so D minor 7, going to a G7, and then back to C. Okay, so okay, so you hear how I'm hopping around in the left hand? I know that some teachers really object to that. It just sounds choppy. It doesn't sound professional. We're not worried about the professional aspect of it. We're just worried about whether or not you can even hear the change first. Training your ear to hear something in a fuller sound first, and then you can decide, you can choose how you want to play that further. So I could also play my D minor 7 chord this way if I wanted to, and then my G7 chord like this, and then I can play my C chord like that, so it sounds really full. To me, that is more pianistic. So what helped me when I was trying to figure out how to analyze the music of Chopin, the music of Brahms, and they use a lot of octaves in their music and in their compositions. And so seeing a chord played in full, in a fuller sound, really helped me to see how the analysis was supposed to go. And I see that sometimes with my students, the ones that I inherit, like they don't understand how the chord is formed across the grand staff, for instance, or students that play other instruments such as flute or something else where they only have to read one clef, and then they come into piano and they still don't understand how would you spread the harmony across the staff. So anyway, here's another example of the same progression. We're going from a D minor 7 to a G7 to a C, and this is what we're going to play above that. So again, I'm just going to play it in the left hand just so you can get a sense of. Okay, so again, the word motif is coming up. Now, we're not talking about the keyboard, the motif. We're talking about actually the motif, right? So I had to throw in a little bit of laughter there. So if you've never heard the word outside of the keyboard, then we'll talk about this in a few more moments. Just stay with us, please. So you can also put together the motifs. Okay. And so that gives you an idea of some of the things you can do as you are learning to make music. Let me say this to you. Please make music. I'm going to give a shout out. I'm going to give a shout out a little bit later to one of my students who is under pressure by her family. It's a good thing I'm not saying names, protecting the confidentiality of my students, but it's not the first student that's had that type of pressure. Your family really wants to hear you play something. And so maybe you're not comfortable yet playing in front of others, but I would say try to just make music and have fun with it. So sometimes you just have to be reminded of the point of the music making. Okay, so here we are. Now I'm not going to play this in rhythm at all. It's just an example. I'm just going to try to play it so that you hear some of the harmonies. So, of course, I wasn't playing that with the right feel at all. But if you do, then it's going to sound the way it's intended to sound. I really wanted to have you listen to the chord changes. So here we have a B flat 7 chord. And what's so fascinating with me about chords is that some students will do more with chords than others. Really. So B flat 7 chord, if I just play it in full position like this, and then go to an E flat 7 chord, back to B flat 7 chord, and then a D flat 7 chord, and then a C minor 7, F7 to a B flat 7. Okay, so that sounds really full, really thick, and probably very cluttered. So a professional would know exactly what to do with the left hand and how to make the right hand work together with it. So I'm just going to play one. Let's see. Should I pick the B flat 7 or the E flat 7? The C minor 7? C minor 7 sounds interesting to me. And so I'll just play that. There's just one bar. There's just one measure with a C minor 7 chord. So I'm just going to do that. Now, I think I'm just going to take that with the one hand and play that. And so in the left hand, I'm just going to play a C minor 7 chord. Okay. I'm actually going to move this. I'm going to do something called octave transposition. I'm going to move this up. Okay. Then I'll go ahead and go to an F7 chord. And then it will resolve, I think, on a B flat 7 chord. Okay, so we'll just stop there. But did you like that progression? Applaud if you like that progression. So again, we could talk in terms of Roman numerals. Would it make sense to use this formula to go from these chords to other chords? Did you even like the sound, and what would you change about that? I like 7 chords. I have students that will only play up to 7 chords, and then they say, okay, that's it. I don't want to do anything further. Okay, I think we're going to stop there because I could go on and on and on about this. A very exciting topic for me. I just wanted to give you a little bit more experience with hearing 7th chords, because in last week's episode, if you were here, we took something totally different. We flipped the script and we went on a tangent, so to speak, and played some 7th chords from a very popular song that is still popular to this day. But anyway, we're going to go back to our other location, and then we'll continue by talking about the students that we're shouting out this week. And then we'll tell you what's coming up on the CMajor radio show. Should be easy to figure out. The CMajor radio show is just a follow-up, but a more serious, focused follow-up, because then we really delve into a little bit more serious topics. So I may even keep out that music dictionary so we can go with some other terms as well to help you in your music making and your music learning. Okay, so now we're coming back into the recorded music. And you are listening to CMajor Before the Show. I'm your host, CMajor Porter. Just give me a few moments. I'm going to have a sip of tea, and I'll be back in a moment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, CMajor Porter. You're listening to CMajor Before the Show. I'm back. I just had to get a sip of some iced tea, some green iced tea. And even though it's cold outside, sometimes you like to have something cold to drink. So, okay, now I'm jumping on my computer. Now, we're going to move on now to some shout-outs. And the reason why is it was a really interesting week this week. I wasn't sure who I would shout out. I wasn't sure at all. I just thought to myself, who would I like to shout out for this week? I think I'm going to shout out, let's see, I think about 7 students. I think I'm going to shout out about 7 students. So the first student that I want to shout out is a student who has really, really come a long way in her music making. She has the support of both parents, which I love. And I just love the idea that both parents come to the piano lessons. And so they're present. To me, that makes such a huge difference than if parents just think, oh, that's just my child's thing. I'm not involved. I don't know anything about it. And they're trying to show me a little bit about it, but I don't know if I can get it. So there's a difference with someone who would say something like that versus someone that would say, you know, I really want to sit in and watch you as you are learning. But I would have to say, overall, I would say I have 99% supportive parents. It's just that 1% sometimes where you just think, okay, these parents are really hoping that the results of the piano lessons will take them to fill in the blank. And then sometimes they're very specific and they have a timeline in their minds, and then we have to just have a conversation about that. But this student I wanted to shout out because I feel like she went away from music making, was coming back into it, wasn't quite sure how much she remembered. So we're at a point of building her confidence. And then out of nowhere, the student just said with probably the highest amount, if that's a way to describe it, the highest amount of confidence that she could do something. I asked her if she thought she could, and she said, oh yes, I can do that. So shout out to her. And she said it in front of her parents, and she was able to try on something new and to really make it happen for herself. So really happy for her. Shout out to her. Now, the next student that I want to shout out is number 1. So student number 2 that I wanted to shout out, the second student, is one who is just coming into music making for the first time, really. And so the student really is trying on something new, really. And so to really embrace music making and the concept of rhythm, learning to spell rhythm for the first time, and letting the imagination just run wild. And so again, the support of the parents has a lot to do with that. And so the student comes to the lesson with ideas of what they want to play, what they want to accomplish in the class, and asks a lot of great questions, and then just really goes for it. And so I can see the creativity, and I can see the desire to really work on music and music making. So I just wanted to give a shout out and just to encourage that student. So shout out to that student. Okay, now the next student that I would like to shout out is a student who also, again, has the support of the parents, and has really challenged herself to learn to read music, came to the table bringing a knowledge of familiar tunes, if that makes sense. The student actually had a library of songs that they could bring to the table and play from that library in the first lesson, but said, there's something more. I believe I want to split my time between learning to play these familiar tunes better on the piano, but at the same time really challenging myself to learn to read music better. So shout out to that student. Now, the fourth student that I would like to shout out is a student that I've shouted out before, actually. And the reason why is because this student really has surprised me with their ability to learn a very advanced intermediate piece in a very short time and taking piano lessons for the first time. So in less than 6 months, the student has really accomplished the goal they want to accomplish. And at the same time, the student has upgraded their sound once and has already committed to upgrading their sound again. So big shout out to this student and cheers for the student, because I've not seen a student do that, where they upgraded their sound twice within such a short period of time, that they saw the need to do it and was able to explain to their parents the need to do it. And so shout out and cheers to this student. So that was the fourth student. I just have 3 more students that I want to shout out. But that was just amazing. I don't think I've had a student to really be that excited about making music. And let me say this too, that a lot of my students are very busy scheduled. Another word for that would be hyper scheduled. And so to see their calendar so full of things to do, and to see how many interruptions they have when it comes to practicing and making music is just remarkable. They're still enjoying making music and coming to the lessons. So I'm very excited about that for them. So good for you guys. I'm going to give a big shout out, of course, at the end for everyone. So where am I now? 5, 6, 7. The fifth student that I want to shout out is a student who is coming to the end of a method book that we were able to get her in, which basically accelerates the learning. And so very excited for the student, because we didn't know which way it was going to go. That student also came from a music making background with an instrument that plays only one staff. So she only had to worry about playing music using the treble staff, and so being introduced to the grand staff for the first time in piano lessons, and then just embracing that and saying, I can do this. I like the idea of playing music with my left hand and my right hand, putting hands together. Worked on her technique, worked on being relaxed while she was playing, all of that. So that was just really great. And to see that she's almost at the end of this method book and is looking forward to going into other music making. And then what's really blowing me away is that the student is now starting to create her own songs. Can you believe that? I mean, from writing her own songs in collaboration with friends to now thinking about writing a holiday song to be played on piano and to present that in the class is just amazing. So big shout out to this student. Okay, so I just have 2 more students that I would like to shout out. And so it's such a special situation when you have a student that does not have an instrument at home to practice and does not have a method book yet because of that, and that the parent's just waiting to see what the interest really is. And so what that left us in the position to do was just do a lot of rote learning. But it seems to be working. So the student is not only still retaining what the student is able to do on the piano during the lessons, but also asking for more, and also starting to design their own timeline for learning certain things. So we're able to do a lot of memory work in class. We're also able to do a lot of playing of familiar tunes, talking about the construction of the song, talking about how the song starts, starting with songs that will be a little bit easier, starting to assess what's easy, what's difficult for the student to grasp. And then what I like most about this student, which you don't see that often in younger students, is that the student doesn't mind repeating. So not in the effort to play it perfectly, but to really get it and to say, this is how the melody goes. And then we put a visual with that. So before, we come up with our own system of pictures to describe the sound. And then we ease more into the letter names of the sound. So we moved away from playing on black keys, and then just started to really grasp using the music alphabet. But now understanding how to put together the order of the notes based on lettered notation. And so what's also funny is that the student is also trying to find ways to put the letters together so they sound as words, so they can recall how the song goes. So that was really, really funny today. So shout out to this student. I really admire your courage, and the student is really just such a joy to work with. And so thank you to the parents for trusting me to really help the student, and just applause for everyone involved, really. I know you must be thinking, how many times can she say the word student? Well, I could say pupil. Well, it's just because you're really trying to protect the names by not saying the names, and then you have to be careful with saying he or she and all of that. So you want to just be as neutral as possible. And so I think with that in mind, I'm just trying to describe to you, and hopefully you're getting the picture. So if you are a classmate of mine or a fellow teacher, and if you're a student and you want to know more about these stories, please let me know. I love sharing the stories, by the way, because they're real stories of how the students are coming along. So it may not be as fast as you want. It may not even be as smooth as you want when it comes to the learning. But I watched a really interesting video recently that was talking about choosing to do things because you want an occupation in those things, and then choosing to do things because you really want an academic education, you really want a good, solid foundation of just learning something new, trying on something new. So I think even though the students are young, they're not thinking about making music as a job, not yet. I don't think I have one student that's thinking in that direction, but they can think in terms of the learning. You know, a wise person once said that education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. You can substitute the word education for music if you want. I think of music as being life itself. If you are going to med school, you're in pre-med, of course, you think of medicine as life. You may even think of music making as fun, and medicine is life. Med school is life. You can substitute what you do or what you're choosing to do for what you think of it as, and what it means to you, what it means to your situation. And so it's so interesting. This last student that I'm going to shout out is a student who does not have the time nor the attention, really, and the desire to practice piano. But what's starting to come out of that is, because of the student's learning style, being such a strong visual learner, and also being kinesthetic at the same time, and then having a good ear, but they're able to really strengthen their sight reading, because now they're forced to really read during the lessons because they haven't practiced. So it's interesting. Not every student could do that, but I just want to shout that student out for their improvement in sight reading. For whatever reason, it seems to be working. I have students that are working on sight reading, but this one particular student, it's just really surprising me week after week after week of being able to read something, and at the same time realizing that if he were able to put more time into practicing, that his sight reading and his playing and his technique would become even stronger. But shout out to this student. I know you're making the best music you can make at this time. And so, having said that, I really just want to give a huge shout out to all of my students as we get ready to go into the CMajor radio show. I just want to give you an idea of what we'll be talking about next week as well. But big shout out, big applause to all of my students. So I'm very lucky to have you, and I feel that you are starting to see so many possibilities when it comes to music making. You're making the choices that you want to make. You're letting me know what those choices are, and we're just working together to really get things under your fingers and to have you understand the concept of practicing and all of the above. So thank you so much. And so now, as we close today's show, I want to give you a heads up about what we're going to be talking about over at the CMajor radio show. We will be talking about chords. And I have a question. Did you do your homework? Well, I'm going to be posting more homework. So see me over at CMajor's classroom. See me at CMajorPorter.com. We're going to do more over there. Now, if for some reason you are not into chords as much, but you're into original music making, I I posted a video over on one of our social media pages. I'll just turn this down for a minute. And so I want to encourage you to just get something like this. It's a little synthesizer, and really it's got a couple of oscillators built in. If you don't know what that is, I posted a link to somebody who was discussing Moog and some of the legendary things that you can find happening on recordings where they use a particular Moog keyboard and they used a particular sound on the recording. Okay, but something like this, you just never know what you're going to be able to come up with. You can work with pitch. You can work with different shapes of sound waves. But I think it works best if you start to think about, other things you can do, and then you can connect this to other instruments. So we promised you that we're going to play some interesting sounds. Hopefully you found that interesting. I just kept thinking to myself, how can I use Moogs when I perform live? How can I do that? Would it even make sense to do that? I've really been on the fence about that. So if I can just talk about that music making for a moment. But what I'm excited about and what I think I will do is just start to collaborate with others. So if you are a violinist or a viola player and you're out there, get in touch with CMajor, because I have something that I want to work on with you. And I have some ideas already, but I just need that sound. And then I had an idea of some other sounds, but I just needed to make sure it made sense to put those other sounds with the music making that I had in mind. But I'm looking to work with a violinist or a viola player, and we'll take it from there. See me later over at CMajor before the show. And I'm sorry, at the CMajor radio show, that is. And then just to give you an idea of what we'll be talking about next week, let me lower my music for a moment. I think what we're going to do is continue where we're starting today. What we'll do over at the CMajor radio show, I'm going to spell out these chords that I was playing for you earlier. So even if you are going to head on over there, or if you're making that your first stop today and you didn't hear what we did earlier, no worries. You can always download this again and play it back. And then you'll know exactly what we're talking about. Now, for some reason, my attention is more towards 7 chords. And now I'm looking at a different textbook. Now, this says it's a professional arrangement. Because it's Christmas time, basically, I'm going to see if I can play this arrangement slowly next week. So something to look forward to. It's a professional arrangement that includes mostly minor chords. I see 1 split bass chord and then mostly 7 chords. So I'll see what you think about it. So we'll continue our professional look at professionally arranged chord progressions. Is that how we would describe it? I might use that for next week's episode. But thank you so much for tuning in. And you know what? Now I'm thinking about it, we won't be meeting next week. So the week after. So we'll meet hopefully the Saturday following Thanksgiving. Why? Because I have something else I need to do next week. And so I want to be able to give my full attention to that. So we'll meet again right here on this podcast for a full episode on November 30th. So mark your calendars for that. November 23rd, we're taking off. But I will be making some announcements probably across the week. And I think I've decided to suspend my promos for the C Major radio show for the moment as we go into the holiday season. So I'll say more about that as we come back on the 30th, and then just give you my thoughts for, again, what I plan to do for 2020. So I just want to make sure we make a smooth transition into the new year, and to be very clear about where we're going with our music making. So chord progression seems to be on the forefront right now. But again, as I talk with my students, and they're letting me know, some of them are letting me know how interested they are in various topics like harmonic minor scales, melodic minor scales. They like the sound. I have a student that's interested in Pink Panther. I have another student that's interested in other music by Henry Mancini, and is just really excited about music making and the growth that's taking place. And I think I said I was going to shout out that student. I told him I was going to shout him out, but I'm going to shout him out the next time, because I want to see a little bit more about his development, and then I'll give a longer shout out the next time I see you, which will be Saturday, November 30th, for a full episode here on C Major Before the Show. Join me. You are invited. You are invited to join me in a few moments. I'm going to be over at the C Major Radio Show. This is C Major Porter. Thank you so much for tuning in, taking the time on a Saturday evening. I wish you the best, really. I wish you the best with your music making. Never give up on the idea of making music. Live out loud. Make the best music you can make. Make your dreams come true. Dream big. And so I look forward to seeing you the next time we meet. Have a wonderful evening. And the C Major Radio Show is coming up next. Take care.